Bada boom, shebang, we're live. So, how you doing, Wendy?
Hello. I'm a bit frazzled tonight, honey, but it's lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you as well. I'm picking up your words. I don't use the word lovely, but then you say, lovely to see you, love. And I go, lovely to see you too, love. And I'm like, that's not how I say that.
Baby, I'm
Great
running off.
seeing you.
I'm rubbing off on you. What can I say?
Yeah, there's that.
Yeah.
So, let's see. We got Matthew Sainsbury is in the chat room. Hi, Wendy and Scotty, he says. And so we got about 3 minutes, 3 minutes after the top of the hour. Just like with Intrepid and like we do every week, we'll go live. This is just the pre-show. So don't anybody get worked up. Don't anybody get worked up. Don't worry about it. Don't write home about it. Don't go ape shit about it. This is just the pre-show. And that pre-show will end in roughly 2 minutes. And we go into the live show.
It's a pleasant word, says Matthew.
It is a pleasant word. And so, Wendy, how was your post-birthday? You know what? Save it. Be organic. I'll ask you that during the show.
All right, I'll zip it until then, honey.
When we're actually on the airwaves. So,
look at us matching tonight, blue and red, red and blue.
Yeah, we don't match, we complement.
We just need the white in between now, you know, sort of like red, white, blue.
Yes, white. Yeah. I just unzipped this, and you can see my white chest.
That's right.
I'm like the pallor of dead fish, because it's the.
No.
Whoops! It's that was a little too much.
Too
Too much skin showing here. Yeah, it's the middle of winter pale going on.
Thank you, Matthew.
Nice blue clothing, Wendy.
What can I say? It goes with the eyes, honey. It goes with the eyes.
There it is. Hi, Anita Palmer. Good to have you. We're in that pre-show stage. We got about 40 seconds, and we will go live with the intro. And so, Wendy, it'll be the same thing. I will knock us both out of the window, and we will go dark for a few seconds, and then we'll play the intro for the show. And then we'll come in. I'll bring you in during the intro. We'll be in the background.
All right, darling.
So, well, we got about 20 seconds. I suppose now is as good a time as any. So, yeah, Wendy,
just roll VT.
I'm going to make it go dark. Here we go. Well, happy Tuesday and good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be on the globe tonight. Welcome to Robertson, episode 10. And that means that doesn't seem like a lot of episodes in the can, but when you think about it, it's like any new TV series you watch or anything like that, and they're only going a week at a shot.
Halfway through.
You're 10 weeks into the series.
Absolutely.
So I think we're doing okay.
So
how you doing, Wendy?
How you doing? I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay. Cough's almost gone, so that's really good.
What's gone?
The cough. Almost gone.
Oh, the cough is almost gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. That seems to be everybody I know seems to have that going on. A lot of people in radio. Knock on wood, that has not happened to me yet.
The lurgy's going around.
It's going around. And you think we'd all drinking out of the same teacup or something. So I want to welcome everybody stateside and then everybody over in Great Britain who is joining us, all of our friends who join us from New Zealand and Australia on the other side of the world, crikey, and where it's already tomorrow there. And so welcome to everybody over in the chat room. You can all see the chat room over there. If you are not joining us via the radio station over at subspace.radio, you can join us on the YouTube channel right now. You know, what do they say about physician heal thyself? The last patients that doctors take on are themselves. And so it's like with our stuff, we've got to put up our own YouTube, which we just have not created it yet. I'm going to make it a goal to do that this week. So we've got our own YouTube.
Yes, we need to be out there. Chop, chop.
Yes, we do. Chop, chop. Crack the whip. And give me the idol. I'll throw you the whip. So welcome to everybody who's here. That's all that was all about. Just saying, if you're joining us via Facebook, the several different locations over there are joining us on YouTube. Welcome to the show. The best chat room, if you want to chat and have us see your chats, usually is over on not usually, it's over on the YouTube channel. That's right. You can click on that link if you saw it on Facebook. Facebook, we might see your posts, but you're not going to see many of the posts from over here on the YouTube channel. So give that a shot if you want to come in. And everybody else who's listening that's not showing their faces, just watching what's going on, welcome.
And stealth mode, Scotty.
Yeah.
They're in stealth mode watching us.
Yes, stealth mode. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Their cloaking devices are on.
Yeah.
So Wendy had a birthday this week. It was yesterday. And it seems like over there probably seems like 2 days ago because it's already 10 in the evening over there.
Yeah.
But so you had a birthday. Happy birthday again. I was going to say posthumously.
You're going to get your little fluty thing and play it again.
Right here.
He has it.
Shall we do a replay? We'll see. Let's give a little history to that. Reuben Fasthorse, my Native American friend, Lakota Sioux, Lakota language revivalist, Native American historian, grew up on Pine Ridge Reservation. He played a little birthday tune for her yesterday morning on his flute, and then did his little Native American, his Indian song to go with it.
Yeah,
that was the like hey, and so not to be outdone by Reuben. I said, well, Reuben, I have a little song to play for Wendy's birthday as well, and it goes something like this. And I pulled out my wooden flute, and so Wendy, I call this your day after your birthday song.
Ode to Wendy.
Ode to Wendy. It goes like this.
Oh my God, Reuben, we're so sorry.
There it is. So that was my post-birthday song for Wendy, done in the fashion of Native American music.
Yes.
So I'm glad Reuben is my friend and my brother, and he took
well, he was.
That. He found it rather funny. So there you go. So once again, not belated because I said happy birthday on time, day after birthday. So it's good to have you here.
Thank you, darling.
And today we're going to talk about some things that, once again, Wendy, you and I, we grab topics that are maybe pop cultural, maybe they're fun to talk about, maybe they're interesting, but it always can float very easily to that darker side. I don't mean dark, or macabre. I mean that melancholic side of things, because we all have experiences that back up the things that we're going to be talking about. And today, I could introduce the topic because you wanted to talk about Presley and some of the other deaths and so on. And as if you guys all read the brief intro, today's show is about death and grieving And whether it's a loved one or it's a celebrity or it's a hero, there's always something that cuts to the core with all of us. So, Wendy, could you take this topic and give a little introduction to it the way you kind of told me where you want to go with this today?
I think everybody remembers probably where they were on August the 16th, 1977. That was the day that the king of rock and roll died, Elvis Presley. And I think
I just have to say, I was 16 years old in a high school, and I was working at the donut shop right over by the high school. And it was the summer months, and so that's what I was doing. I was working, and we heard it on the news.
I was 7. I wasn't too well at the time. I think it was the summer. It was really hot and no one could believe it. And, you know, I grew up in a family that loved Elvis. He was a massive influence in my family. You know, music was always on. And my mum says she remembers when he first came out, people were burning his records, you know, outside the Woolworths, and, you know, because it was so controversial, because now we can't imagine life without him,
Right.
as in the influence that he's done. And so it was really sad, especially when on his 88th birthday on the 8th of January, just last week, everybody, you know, knows that a lot of fans go to Graceland. They do, they celebrate his birthday. He would have been 88 this year. And his daughter was there, Lisa Marie, and she's been through a lot in her life. This is the princess of rock and roll, let's be honest. She, you know, she went through a traumatizer of finding her dad dead at the age of 9, and literally being in that shadow, I would imagine, for so many years, as in, who are you apart from Elvis's daughter? And obviously a couple of days later, she was at the Golden Globes watching Austin Butler receive his award for his role as Elvis. And she looked incredibly frail that day. It's weird how she was on the 8th. She looked different to the one she looked on the, I think what day was it? I'm just trying to say, 2 days prior. So on the 14th, she was like literally holding on to someone's arm. She was having trouble walking up a few steps.
Do you think? No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt right in the middle of your sentence, but do you think some of that had to do with the emotion of the moment? What kind of emotion do you think she felt for her dad, who's been gone for over 40 years?
I think she said in one of the interviews that seeing the film, she had to take 5 days and process it, because watching him play Elvis brought back so much. And she said it was like seeing my dad all over again, and it kind of affected her. I think what most people were talking about is how she looked. Her pallor wasn't that, she looked a bit clammy. Her pallor didn't look good. She seemed a bit disorientated, and she seemed very fragile. That's the sort of thing. She was sort of holding on to an arm, and you know, very sort of just not her usual self. So it was an absolute shock, although I would say perhaps not a total surprise that she would pass unexpectedly so early, because the Elvis's family is right. You know, I'm just, you know, Elvis was 42, I think, when he passed.
Miserably young.
I mean, it's incredibly young.
Hey, Joseph Andrassi in the chat room, by the way. Haven't seen you for a long time, brother. Good to see you.
And literally, I'm just going back to see his mum was 46, I think, when she passed. He had 3 uncles that all passed young, I believe, in their 40s, and they all went the same way. They all went with heart issues. And so Lisa Marie wrote a song, very, very famous song, called Lights Have Gone Out, in Memphis. And she talks about, there is all my family are buried in the back garden. There's a space waiting for me. So this is someone who knows where she's going, who knows what her destiny is eventually. And so when she died, she was found, you know, just, I mean, everybody knows, but just to recap, she was found on in her home in, I think it's Calabasas. And they don't know how long she'd been there, but obviously her heart had stopped. They got it going again by using adrenaline. By the time she got to the hospital, sadly, she was brain dead. And they had a do not resuscitate if she was to come round again, or she had another cardiac arrest, and this time they let her go. She was 54 years of age. 54.
Wow.
And this time, and it's such a shock that just a couple of years older than myself, a woman that I've always admired, really, because this is a lady that used to come to the UK. She used to be in Sussex, and she had a house here. And every Christmas and winter time, she would come with her family, and she would come over to Sussex in a beautiful, beautiful home. And she'd go to the local pub, and she'd have a hoodie on, and she'd sit in the back of the pub, and she'd be like, I just want to be
just want to hang out. Yeah.
And they used to have lock-ins, and they'd play Elvis songs till late. And then also she used to be in the local fish, there'd be a little, over here outside the pubs, we often have fish and chip vans or burger vans or something like that. And she actually served in one of them, and she said it was great fun. So this is a woman that, even though she was worth millions and known anywhere, loved just being a normal person doing her own thing.
And one thing I find, and this is no news flash for anybody out there, and by the way, if I'm not keeping my eyes up there, the camera's up there, but Wendy is down here. So I look at her here, and the chat room's over here. So if you see my eyes shifting around, I'm reading the chat room. I'm looking at, almost like Wendy's talking to my face. I'm looking into her eyes, but the camera's up there. So this is no newsflash to everybody, but anybody. But it seems to me, the older I get, the more I am impressed. It doesn't matter who you are. What was it? Was it Gandalf that said in the books, and also the Lord of the Ring movies, one of those moments where he says, death comes to us all. And so it's not so much having the knowledge that everybody's going to die and we're going to lose somebody along the way. Even people we don't even know, they're going to die. They're going to pass on. That stuff is there. That part of life is there, not stuff. I didn't mean it that way. But I am also impressed with how much we can grieve over the loss of somebody we never knew.
That's right.
I have had people die that I didn't know very well that brought a tear to my eye. I've had family members die that it's brought a tear to my eye, and you grieve over it. And I think, why do I react the same way when there's, say, a celebrity who dies that was a hero? I remember when Alan Hale Jr. died. Now, you know him the best as the skipper from Gilligan's Island in the 1960s. And he was always, I never looked at him as being any kind of father figure or anything like that, but he made a big impression on me when I was a little kid watching those shows. And when he died, I was sitting in my office as a creative director in an ad agency in 1989. And we got the news that he died. It was 89 or 90. And I remember I choked up, and I said, and then I asked myself the question, why am I choking up? Why am I crying? I didn't know Alan Hale Jr., but you felt like you did. So it's these celebrities that we follow that are close. Elvis's music, his daughter, watch these people, and it can prick the heart.
But I think it's also like Princess Diana. Everybody knew where Princess Diana was when she died, and she left behind 2 young children. And the thing is, Lisa Marie has left behind 3 girls, one of 31, because she had 4 children. Obviously, she had Riley, who is 33, and then she has Ben, who sadly was 27 when he passed, and he sadly took his own life. And she leaves behind 2 young girls at 14, 2 twins, Harper and Finley. And that is heartbreaking, because for them, they're still needing their mum. They haven't got through that. And I think when you lose a parent, no matter what age you lose a
Sure.
parent, your own mortality starts to kick in, because you're like, after my parents have gone, I'm next in line.
Yeah, that's it. I'm next. And,
Yeah.
when we're young, when I was young, when Elvis died, I was 16 years old.
Mm.
And when we're young, we don't look at death or view it the same way, because
Mm.
because our whole life is a vista in front of us that is yet to be traveled.
Yeah.
And we don't know and it seems such a distant thing. Uh, we're touched by it in our personal lives, but we don't think of our own deaths in that way, how mortal we are,
Mm.
until you start getting a little older and you start seeing your mortality. This is the quote, by the way, I was looking for. It's not at all worded the same way, but in the book, Gandalf said, he said, "Death is just another path, one that we all must take. The gray rain curtain of this world rolls back, and all turns to silver glass, and then you see it." And so it sends shivers up the backs of my arms.
I remember, like, when he actually said that, I
Yes.
watching it, and I just thought, what a beautiful way. And it sounds like something that all of us can imagine and look forward to. I've always said, I don't want to know when I'm going, and I don't want to know how I'm
Yeah.
going to go, because I'm still scared of death, even though
Sure.
I think it's the one journey, although we have guides and helpers waiting for us, of course, I know that, and family, it's the one journey we have to do on our own. As in, like, we can't sort of say to someone like, come with me, see me there safely, and come back,
Yeah.
And I, for myself, I've lost, in the last couple of years, a lot of people close to me, for I can think of, spring to mind, that have went, very, very, quite quickly. And what I was saddened to see this week, I mean, I'm a clairvoyant, but I still
Mhm.
believe decorum and tact comes in. What I was saddened to see this week was people already saying, I've spoken to the ghost of Lisa Marie. This
Mhm.
is
Yeah.
the voice, the voice box TV, and she's come through. Now, I'm not wanting to
Right.
discredit everybody, but I just think there's a time and a place, and the poor woman hasn't even been buried yet. I mean, the actual
Right.
funeral is on Sunday, this Sunday coming at 9 a.m. at Gracelands, and where she'll be, buried. And I think, there's a lot of people that just go straight out and go, it's almost like, what's that word? Not the macabre, but they're like the sensational side of it. I want to know
Yes.
everything.
That's something that's always bothered me, and as well as I do. I'm a firm, staunch believer in psychic ability. I know your abilities and am very familiar with them, and very much look to your abilities. Uh, a lot of people I know, my own wife is psychic,
Yeah,
very quietly so. She doesn't promote it. And a lot of people that I know. Yet when I see psychics clamoring to be the first one to mention to the public world that I just got the person who died just yesterday, the celebrity, on my voice box or my spirit box, or they spoke to me and I have a message for the world. It's almost like there are people you don't want to necessarily disbelieve them, especially when you don't know them well. But I also don't think it's good taste. I think
yeah,
even psychic ability
yeah,
needs to operate under a certain modicum of tact and good taste. It's
yeah,
like, maybe you're the first person to get the message, but maybe you should be the first person to say, I'm not going to announce that until an appropriate amount of time has passed.
yeah.
So
I
I,
mean, I also think it depends on the passing, because someone who's passed so young. I had a friend. He was 51 when he passed. His name was Justin, and we went to school together. And he was 6'6". He was mountain of a man. He used to do archery. We were into so much. We had the Doctor Who, the science fiction, the Star Trek, all that kind of stuff. We were into that. And he'd had an accident, and he'd slipped on a rug in his bedroom, and he'd done his shoulder in, and he had to have a surgery. And they said the trouble is with this surgery, it can nick a nerve, which leads to the taste buds. And a lot of people have the problem where for some time after they don't taste anything. Well, because he was desperate for the operation, he had it. It did happen. They did nick it. He did lose the taste for his taste buds. This is over a period of months, and he went from 17 stone of muscle down to literally looking like he had cancer. It was awful.
Right.
And he said he'd almost lost the will to live. Well, just before COVID hit, I'd not been too well, and he came to see me, and we had a very lovely evening together. And I'm so glad that we had that time together. And COVID had just hit. It was the first week of COVID, and his brother sent me a text message, which I didn't think was the way to do it. But hey, they sent me a text message just saying that he said, I'm sorry to tell you, but Justin has passed, and he did love you. And I know you were very good friends, but he's passed. And I just fell apart. I fell apart because COVID was just here. I couldn't go and see anyone. And apparently he had been having what he thought were small panic attacks. And in fact, they were small heart attacks. And it was like all the adrenaline rushing and the heart had raced, but the hospital hadn't picked it up. They couldn't, for some reason, they hadn't really picked it up. Anyway, and so by the time he actually got an ambulance to him, and bearing in mind, this is the week that COVID hit the UK and became, he had a massive heart attack at the hospital and he died. He wasn't allowed a funeral. He wasn't embalmed. It was done so quickly.
Because of the politics of COVID.
Yeah. No memorial service. He was just
That's sad.
And to this day, none of us have had our goodbye. And I think of him every day. And I think his picture used to be up there. I think it must have been over there now. But he, how must he have felt when he got to spirit at 51?
Yeah.
He had so much he wanted to do. So, and I know that, we'll have that conversation where they say, when you're here for and how long you're here for or whatever, but it's still a shock. Like when we go very quickly, when we get over the other side, we have to have that time to recover from the shock, because, the human side to us might be gone, but it's the whole soul healing.
Right.
51 years of age.
This is something I remember. This comes to mind. Two little things here. That when my grandfather died in 1995, he was 78 years old. But at 75, he was touring the jungles of Afghanistan and Thailand, and one of those guys who lived on traveling the world on $2 a day. That's his walking stick right back there against the wall that I have. And that went around the world with him. And I remember he declined rather quickly. He got some sort of cancer, blood cancer, and declined very quickly and died. And I was at his funeral, and I was asked to say a few words. And I said, we all know my grandfather. I called him up by name, and I said he was a great adventurer. And I said, but now I said he's gone on that greatest adventure of all. Yeah. That we're all going to have to take someday. We have no idea where he is. We have no idea what he's experiencing. We don't have the context for that. We have religious writ that we could go by. We have New Age writ that we could go by. We have all these different things. We don't really know where he is, but we do know he's gone on the greatest adventure of them all. And I remember, and this is just speaking to death, and I told this story recently. I think it was on my own show. There was a man that I call my brother. He was a very dear friend of my mother's, and just about my age, a couple of years younger. And we met many, many, many years ago. Good friends. And he became my brother. He was my brother. He was Army intelligence when he was in. He was captured in Afghanistan, and he was tortured. His body, he had several, I think he had at least a dozen bullet scars on his body from that war. He was tortured. They thought him dead for a while. He came back. They reinstated his life. He was declared dead. and he was a contractor, and then he got something that went wrong with him, and he thinks it was due to some of the chemicals he was under in torture, some of the chemicals in the military, and so on, and just started degrading him. And I went to see him in the hospital, and his whole family, his wife's family, was all in the room, and they had him so drugged up he almost couldn't talk, just for the pain, because they said his intestines and everything were disintegrating. And so I remember being there, and he struggled to sit up on an elbow, and he motioned to me, and he was really out of it. And he took one arm and he threw it up, his elbow up over my neck, and pulled me in. And he kind of whispers, and he does this with the other arm. He's holding me, and he says, "All these people," he says, "you're the only one I want to see." And the next morning we were going to go see him, and he was gone. Yeah. Now, I have never heard a word from him since. We're talking on a clairvoyant or a psychic level. Yes. Of course, I've never called out to him either. But he was one of these guys. He had 2 PhDs. He had been all through these experiences. He'd written books, and very intelligent man. And yet we don't know where he is. So this is where I said in the intro of the show, the written intro, from celebrities to our personal experiences to everything, we've all lost these people we love. And then the big question is, what now? What do we do with that information?
But I think grief is such a big subject. And it's like, I know, seeing Mark going through it right now, I've gone through it, and we've all gone through it. And it's like, when somebody, like as in Lisa Marie's case, when her son took his life, there were all those unanswered questions. He might have written something, but at the end of the day, it's like, why didn't, there's all this question. Why? And at the end of the day, grief can be so encompassing, all over, overwhelming, that you can't eat, you can't sleep, you can't breathe. Sometimes the pain is so bad. You've got all the guilt feelings coming up. I should have said this. Why didn't I do that? I didn't give more time. Did they know how much I love them? All these, right. Or if you didn't have a good relationship with that person, when they pass, it's kind of like perhaps the time that you didn't have with them. And, and grief can manifest physically in the body if we don't allow the body to grieve and heal properly. Then, sadly, it's very true that, manifesting with physical symptoms. And, when Ben, her son, died, she was so absorbed in grief. Her heart was broken. And, people have died of broken heart syndrome. Yeah. That's what they call it, broken heart. And it's like the heart, there are brain cells in the heart. There are brain cells.
You who told me this for the first time.
Yeah. There are brain cells.
40,000 brain cells in the heart.
Loads of them. And in other organs, in your kidneys, in your liver, and they're all there. So whatever you're going through in here is coming through, your heart is responding to that. It's sometimes when we get really upset or angry, and we might feel really sick, or we want to run to the toilet, sure, or the heart races. It's because it's working. It's all going as one. So when you lose someone and the grief is so bad, you are, your heart is taking that pain in, and sometimes it can just, it'll break us, it'll give us a broken heart. And some people wonder if Lisa Marie, and we're obviously using Lisa Marie and her sad passing, did this have, apart from the genetic, because obviously Elvis, as I said, Elvis's maternal, I believe, grandparents were first cousins. Is that genetic code? And the fact that she had a lot of drug use in her life, a lot of tragedy in her life, and the fact that she had a broken heart, is this what brought her to an early grave? And you hear that saying, so many, it took them to an early grave. It was an early grave. And I think when somebody, sadly, you know, someone's going to pass, they've had a long illness or whatever, and you know that it's coming. You're never ready for it and you don't want it to come, but you're preparing somehow. But when someone just goes and there's no rhyme or reason, and it's like, and as I was finding it very interesting what I was saying to you today, sometimes when we have an autopsy, you know, we think, well, I don't know why they went, I don't know how they went, but the autopsy will give us that peace of mind. When my uncle died, he died very, very suddenly. And in fact, we actually found him on the floor and he'd been there for a couple of days. And it was a terrible, terrible shock. And the fact that he was alone, nobody, I believe, should die alone. Nobody, but sadly it happens. But it took 6 months to get an autopsy, to get an answer. And even then they couldn't give an answer. And you come to a point and you're like, so how do I know what took them? Like, there's no answer medically. And the very interesting fact was that in Elvis's case, he had an autopsy, and then he had a private autopsy where his father asked for it to be done privately. When the results came back, it was sealed and will not be open until 2027. Now, why would you want to keep an autopsy secret or quiet for 50 years, basically, for 50 years?
There's things they either don't want people to know, or obviously, or.
And that's when we talked about the conspiracy stuff as well, which sadly goes on all the time, as well as all this psychic stuff, is the Bob Joyce. If you Google Bob Joyce, he is a well-known minister or vicar or pastor, or whatever your name you want to give him. And if that is an Elvis's doppelganger, nobody is. He speaks like him. He sings like him. He has the same mannerisms as him. He's even been seen at Graceland on a private entrance going in. Now, obviously, Elvis, if we go by his date of birth, he would be 88 now. But in the land of Hollywood, nobody looks their age, and lots of things going on. But everyone talks about, did Elvis die? Because he was well known to be involved in, there was all the talk about the mafia, and he knew things, and he was a police informant, and yada, yada, yada. It goes on forever. And some people say that he couldn't escape, what was his name, Colonel Parker, and the lifestyle. Who would have blamed that man for actually wanting to get out? He was on his knees. He just couldn't do anymore. So did he die? Because even his body, when he died in the coffin, looked very, very different. I believe his name is spelt wrong or differently on the grave. So there's all these little stories.
Interesting.
And now they brought up something about Lisa Marie, the fact that she was in Scientology, and there was a court case going on, and she'd been asked to persuade someone to not go ahead and go and be a witness. And then they bring up lots of talk about the Illuminati, and you just think, like, who knows? But it certainly makes you look at these people and go, politics, royalty, famous people.
Yes.
They're all involved with so much that we don't know about.
There was somebody I mentioned to you earlier today when we were talking about who died that was celebrity, that I felt a sting with it, and that was Anthony Bourdain.
Yeah.
And I thought, like many of the people around him, they were shocked that he would have taken his own life.
Yeah.
And because they were shocked that he took his own life, there were all kinds of conspiracies that wrapped around it. He was standing out, he started speaking out against, he became very much a part of the Me Too movement, started speaking out against rape and abuse to women.
Yeah.
And there was a friend of his that had experienced rape, and he spoke out about that. And there was a lot of people are quick with the conspiracy theories. I don't disassociate myself from every conspiracy theory out there, because some conspiracy theories give them 6 months and it's the truth. But some of those I didn't listen to too closely, because we did know that Anthony Bourdain had he had struggled with depression. He had a darker side to him, and when I say darker, not a malevolent side, just a more melancholic side to him.
Yeah.
It was like when I learned in history the famous Lewis and Clark expeditions, and in 1805, 1806, in that time period, that Meriwether Lewis committed suicide a few years later. Nobody knew that he was bipolar, and so the same with Anthony Bourdain. And I was really surprised when that happened, because he was in France filming an episode of one of his shows, and I think that's why there were questions, because of the things he was standing out against and speaking out against, plus the fact that he was in the middle of filming episodes, and he was there staying with a friend of his who was part of the episodes, a chef. And so there's all those questions. And his friend who was there, Rippert is his name, Eric Rippert, he said he was the one who discovered Bourdain's body hanging in the hotel room. And he said Anthony was a dear friend. He was an exceptional human being, so inspiring and so generous, and one of the great storytellers of our time, who connected with so many people. I wish him peace. My love and prayers are with his family, friends, and loved ones. And there was something that Anthony Bourdain had said, and this is a quote that my daughter reminded me of. They were big followers of his as well, where this is the type of soul he was, the spirit he had. He said, Anthony Bourdain said, travel isn't always pretty. It isn't always comfortable. Sometimes it hurts. It even breaks your heart. But that's okay. The journey changes you. It should change you. It leaves marks on your memory, on your consciousness, on your heart, and on your body. You take something with you, and hopefully you leave something good behind, he said. And so he was a man that had his darker side, his darker spirit. And I think all the things that we all looked to as the excitement, the adventure that he went on, all the things he saw, to him, he talked endlessly about the people he would encounter and the way it would just break his heart. And that's the legacy he left behind. And so I tend to not go along with the conspiratorialists on his death, even though he was into things that some people probably didn't like the fact he was talking about. They're very powerful people. But he, which is not worth mentioning in this show, but he, I think he also had the ability to become overwhelmed emotionally, and he ended up taking his own life.
I mean, Michael, do you remember Michael Hutchinson, who forms in the group In Excess?
Yes.
You know, and he apparently is supposed to have taken his own life by a sexual act, they believed, you know, when I've forgotten its full name, but where you strangle yourself, and he was supposed to have been found like that. But
yes.
Paula Yates, who was his partner, she swore that he would never, ever take his life.
No,
he
right.
would never take his life because he had a young daughter. But someone was saying he was really, really stressed out over all the grief and all the stress, and, you know, with Bob Geldof and everything that was going on. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? Like, you know,
does.
all of us in just 1 minute can just flip. And I think that sometimes, you know, when you have a funeral, it's a celebration. It's a celebration of someone's life. You know, it should be a celebration. And someone, I was just reading Matthew. I see your kitty in the background.
There he is. Yeah.
No, he's not there.
Well, probably the statuettes over on the bookshelf.
But I mean, in general, I mean, I think the worst thing is as well is that, can you imagine being absolutely famous and losing someone, and everyone thinks they've got a claim on him? So Lisa Marie's had to share her dad with the
With the
world.
world.
You know, the graveyard. I mean, even if you look over the fence, you can see the house, you can see it all. She's had to share that all her life, you know, and it's like the house. It's interesting with the house. There, no one's allowed to go upstairs. It's only on the bottom you're allowed to go through Graceland. But some talk about there's a room up there that is only she would go in, and it had all his, I think, a lot of his outfits and his trophies and everything. And she says, you know, it's where I feel his presence the most. And also when someone dies and you're left behind, the dead go on living through the living. And certainly in her case, you only had to look at her and the eyes and the voice, you know, you can see her dad. And now obviously her children are going to have to sadly deal with that as well. And I think that when our grandparents go, as you were talking about with your granddad, if they get to a certain age, you think, well, I don't want to see him going. I don't want him to go. But you kind of expect it. But when someone goes so young, it's like it's such a shame. So terrible.
It is. Kenny Ballos said, I think he's referring to Anthony Bourdain. He said he was taken out.
Yeah.
It's a very good possibility. I know all his friends, even his girlfriend at the time, said this is not who he was. We didn't see him as somebody who would kill himself.
I mean, I was just put about Paulie Yates. She was found dead in bed. They were both drug users. They were both had alcohol issues. I mean, they had a young daughter. You think they probably would have known better. But you know, when someone dies and you just go, it won't be long before they join them. It won't be long before they're with them.
Right.
Just know. And it was like, if you have two parents or two grandparents or two partners that are so close and one goes, sometimes around the 18 months or something like that, you know, my best friend and I'm sure she won't mind me saying this, but she lost her grandparents within 3 weeks of each other. 3 weeks. I mean, you're just dealing with one, and then sadly you've now got the other one on top. And although you've got that comfort that they're together and they're together, for you it's kind of like they're behind. You're trying to process this, you know. Grief is, and it's not just grief over human beings, it's grief over animals. I mean, if an animal, if you love your beloved animal and they go, and I don't know if I'm just the one person this, but I've always found it incredibly difficult to watch an animal having to be put to sleep. Even if you're with them, you feel the biggest terrible person in the world. They've got no voice. You're having to make that decision. You feel terrible. You don't want to say it's just awful. And I think that so many people don't realize that grief is an illness on its own. I mean, it really it can really consume you and be like,
well, it's all those connections you're talking about throughout the body, the brain cells.
Yeah.
And so on. And as a bit of levity, I saw a comedian. He was an Irish comedian just the other day. And he was talking about, he says, a couple of years ago, he says, I lost my dad. My dad died. And the audience is kind of silent. And he says, he died of cancer. And he said, a couple of days after he was gone, he says, my mom, she said, how are we going to tell the dog? And people kind of chuckled in the audience. And he said, it's a real thing. And he says, so we got home and I dropped her at home and she walks inside and she says to the dog, she gets down on one knee and says, I have to tell you something. You know, Da has passed away and he's gone. And she said the dog reacted, stood still for a moment, then turned, crawled into Da's favorite chair and curled up and died the next night, laying in that chair. And the audience is falling apart. And here's the upshot. It was a comedic routine. And he goes, oh, fuck y'all, he says. I made up the story about my dad. He says, I said my dad died of cancer. I didn't hear a pin drop. And he says, but I tell you, the dog dies and you're all cry and you want to name a highway after him. He says, you want to put up marble stones. And I thought it was funny because it's the way what is the difference that we have when we approach the death of a loved one and the death of a pet? We hear a dog or an animal dies.
Well, animals are incredibly loyal. Look at Greyfriars Bobby. The dog, very famous dog. If you Google that, you'll know that this is a dog that would go to the grave and wait there for his owner, even though he was passed. And then there's that other film that came out, I think, Haichi or something like that, with Richard Gere was in it, and it was a similar story about the loyalty, because how do animals know when they lose their owners? I mean, yes, they're supposed to see them, of course they are,
sure,
but animals, we know, see spirit incredibly well. The cat will alert you, the dog will alert you. They'll be looking at something. And when my uncle passed, and I went down there with my mom and we took Henry, and I remember when he walked in, and he was kind of, it was just odd. He was not at ease when he first went in that house, and every time he went in, he was very, I don't know. And it took because we had the house, the house had to be sorted out and everything, and until eventually it went. And it was, by the time everything was out, the house had a completely different feeling about it, of course. And I often wonder, for instance, it was, I've had some terrible memories of how I've lost my animals, and it breaks your heart. And so grief, I don't think there's a difference. Grief is grief. You can't say an animal or a person is more and more. If you love someone, if you care about them, grief is grief.
Mm-hmm.
And Lisa Marie, actually, just before she died, she actually wrote an essay about grief. I can hear the footsteps. And she talks about, though she was asked to write about grief, and she felt like she was in a good position to do so. And I just wanted to read just this line that she'd written. She says, "Death is part of life, whether we like it or not, and so is grieving. There is so much to learn and understand on the subject, but here's what I know so far. One is that grief does not stop or go away in any sense, a year or years after the loss. Grief is something you will have to carry with you for the rest of your life. In spite of what certain people or our culture wants us to believe, you do not get over it. You do not move on, period." And she writes that it's been a real choice to keep going amidst all the agony, because I've been dealing with this since 9 years of age. I've dealt with death, grief, and loss. I've had more than anyone's fair share of it in my lifetime, and somehow I've made it this far. And she wrote that, and she also was part of a bereavement group and a grief to help other people, because she felt like if she was doing something, it was helping other people. But it was also helping her. And now, because her own family is going to be going for it, like we all do, like when we all lose someone. And for me, it's like, when people say, best way to die is just go to sleep and not wake up. It might be for us, but for the people that have got to find us, it's not that good, is it?
It's those that are left behind. It's I had heard it said, kind of like you were just stating, is that grief doesn't ever go away. The best we can do with grief is you tend to gloss it over a bit, and you tend to live with it. Just like, I think it would be like, getting a wound of some kind that heals up, but it has messed up something so badly that you'll feel that the rest of your life. It's healed. It's not going to kill you, but it's still there, and it still has created problems. It creates that hole and that vacuum. I have people that if I think about them, it doesn't have to be hard enough. If I think about them and I give it any thought at all, I have to, and I'm sure you're like this too, Wendy. There are people that you can acknowledge it in your memory. There's this, there's a picture, there's that. But if you go beyond that, below that surface, we
Mm.
have this surface crust that we put on it that's kind of hardened to the air, so to speak. You tap on it, and that's where we view these things. But if you ever crack through that crust and go down underneath, it's all right there. It's
Yes.
all right below the surface,
And
and
people think
so
that,
it's
you know,
always there.
it's after the funeral. That's when you need the more support after, because, you know, that's when everyone seems to disappear and go away, and that's when you need them
Mhm.
more than ever. But Niall brings up a very good point, because if you were to divorce someone that you've been with for a long time, or you break up with someone you've been with a long time, that is a bereavement. That is a grief. That is
Yeah,
a death. You know, a death of your lifestyle, your life that you knew, and everything, and your heart is still hurting and still breaking. And that's a very, very good point, because, you know, pain and grief, whether it's from death of a marriage, death of a person, you know, it's all grief, it's all pain.
right.
And so it's a very good point that he's brought up.
Yes. Wendy, we are at that point in the show where we've got less than 2 minutes and we have to say goodbye to the radio audience. And I can't stick around too long tonight afterwards, just a few minutes. So we'll stick around over in the YouTube chat room for a while, folks. But in about 2 minutes or less now, about a minute and a half, we got to get out of here for the radio. So, any final words you want the radio audience to know before we
There was
sign off?
there's a very good poem by Elizabeth Fry. Do not stand at my grave and weep. I am not there. I do not sleep. I am a thousand winds that blow. I am the diamond glints on snow. I am the sunlight on ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn rain. When you awaken in the morning's hush, I am the swift uplifting rush of quiet birds in circled flight. I am the soft stars that shine at night. Do not stand at my grave and cry, I am not there, I did not die. We go on. We all go on, whether it's our legacy, whether it's our spirit, whatever you want to believe, our light still burns brightly.
And that's it. And that's something I've been very close to in Egyptian culture, ancient culture, was the eternal life was in the name. It was in the remembrance.
Mm.
In a simple animated movie that I watched with my family, and the kids loved this movie called Coco, and it was the name of the dog, Mexican boy who goes to look for his real father in the afterlife, and that real death comes when
Yeah.
your family doesn't remember you anymore. You're not one of the remembered ancestors.
Mm.
And that came out very strong in that movie. So, well, I'm going to leave everybody with that. The radio audience, we got to get out of here. Join us on the YouTube for a few minutes. So live long and prosper. All right, and here we are. We're back. We are off the airwaves over at subspace.radio, and we're just here in the chat room over on the YouTube channel. And thank you, Wendy, for everything you had to say today. I cannot stay very long today. I got some things going on with the
Everybody
family.
wants you. I was just reading some of the comments actually, and I've just seen what Niall's written about the animals.
Yes.
The owner's remains, they will lie on the grave because that is where their owner is. That's a very strong point. And Spirit Heart, Gods and Goddesses, I quit a job at the City Dog Pound for all the reasons. Absolutely. I would imagine that's an incredibly hard
That would be tough
thing to do. Absolutely. I mean, it's really important that we know people don't talk about death enough. I mean, that's not true. They do, but it's like it was a taboo subject for so long. People didn't talk about it. And some people still don't talk about it. They find it uncomfortable. They don't want to talk about it. And it's like, Mark was saying, it's now more than ever that you need people to talk to you and bring up memories and listen, and it's very important that we're all there for each other. Life is so short that if we don't take a minute to tell someone how, I love you, you're very important to me, say those things to people that you love, because you never know, life is short.
Yeah.
You never know.
You never know when you might not see them again.
Yeah.
I tell my wife every now and then, I'm heading off somewhere, and I said, just in case I die on the road or something,
Yes.
I just want to tell you I love you. So, I like and I'm going to pretty much kind of end on this from my end. Anita Palmer said, I always go with my pets when it's time. I hold them, tell them the joy they brought to me and how blessed I felt to have them in my life. It's okay to leave, and I'll see them one day in the future. I also can feel often their presence near at times. And so, yeah, pets, people, I did a whole show on this once on this topic because somebody had presented this to me, and I bristled at the notion. They said that, well, animals are animals. They don't have souls. When they die, they're gone. And this was a Christian, somebody very biblically well-versed, supposedly. And my comment to him on that, and it was somebody I knew, and my comment was, I disagree with you. I said, let me just take you to scripture because that's the basis of your claim. I said, doesn't it say that there is not a sparrow that falls, but God is not grieved in his heart? Does it not say that? Now I can't. He talks about the sparrows, and then talks about the very hairs of our heads are numbered, and so on. I said, if you go to the spiritual side of this argument, you could say that God created everything that he loved, and he declared it beautiful. He declared it done. He declared it good. And man being the last thing he created. Now, this is, of course, in accordance with Judeo-Christian theology. So I would think that if a creator God who invested that much of himself into creating the animal kingdom, I would have to think by various other verses in those same scriptures that would seem to indicate that he's surrounded with the souls of those beings, the spirits. I think they say, are you a dichotomist or a trichotomist? A dichotomist, body and spirit.
Well, I think it's very ignorant, isn't it, to think that they don't fear, they don't have feelings just like us, and they also grieve as well as we do. They just do it in a very different way. I mean, like my mum used to say to me when one of our cats or our dogs used to pass, she'd let the other animals see, like them, so that they saw. And I think, as I said, grief is grief. It doesn't matter whether it's from a divorce, a broken relationship, a broken heart, a death, or whatever it is. It's like, but the only thing different about the others to death is that some people are uncomfortable talking about death, for sure.
Yeah. Niall says a fear of death often manifests as fear of life also. And in other words, we hate to live and lose. I think to a certain point, I agree with you. I don't know if I agree fully with that last comment there, Niall. I'd have to tap your mind a little bit on that one. But fear of death does manifest as fear of life. I may not know 100% about what lies beyond death, but it doesn't scare me. Now, the mode of death could get me a little nervous if I thought about it.
Yeah.
But hey, Viking, good to see you in here. Viking Off-Roading says, hey, Scotty and Wendy. So now I hate to be the first one to do this, but I got to get out of here.
You
And I
gotta
leave
go.
this conversation where it's at. If you want to talk to Wendy, you saw in the closing credits, there's an email where you can send her, Wendy at subspace.radio. And she'll get those emails. And if you want to talk to her, there's probably other ways. If she's open to it, she'll give you her a way to get a hold of her on Facebook and some of her social media as well. So, Wendy, as always, great pleasure spending
It
an hour
is.
with you.
And it's lovely to see you. And I mean, I just wanted to pick up just before you go is that
Yes.
Colleen wrote that this is a hard subject for her right now because she's obviously grieving. But thank you both for a better insight. And if we've helped in any way, Colleen, then that's wonderful. I'm so
I
sorry
hope
I'm
it
going
has.
through it right now.
All right.
Big hugs.
There you go. Big hugs. All right. We will see you all later. There is no Intrepid Radio tonight. I will probably be doing Ken Ballas's Morning Coffee with KB tomorrow morning.
Yes, you are everywhere.
And I've got Intrepid Radio tomorrow night. You need to come on Intrepid Radio with me or something.
Hardy Scotty's on with Ken, right?
Oh, there it is. There it
We
is.
miss you,
Sounds
Ken.
better when you say it than when Kenny
Hardy
says
Scotty.
it.
Hardy Scotty. What is it? Ken always says to me, you have to say naughty no matter what. And I'm
Say
like,
naughty.
I'm trying to get fed up with me saying that actually. But
No, I don't. I think anybody who appreciates you loves to hear you say naughty.
bless you. Bless you, love. But listen, have a great day, what's left of it. And thank you to everyone for joining us. It really means a lot.
And Wendy, you have a great day, a good night. And I'll talk to you probably a little later or tomorrow. And all the rest of you, thanks for being here. We appreciate you being here. I'm going to go out with the new Captain's Cabin intro because we already did our exit for Robertson. After every Intrepid Radio, we do the after show called the Captain's Cabin. So we're going to go out on that because it's just damn fun. I watch it over and over. So here it is. And so all of you live long and prosper. Love you, Wendy. Talk to you soon.
Love you too.